I was thinking about today, I was going to start in a strange place, because I remember reading a book called Mothers and Others, which explained that as a species, we are hardwired to look after each other. That most animals just look after their own children, but we're wired for those of us who still believe in evolution. I realize I'm a small minority in my country, but nonetheless, those of us who believe in evolution think that we are descended from primates who had to look after each other's children when, if the male got killed, the mother had to become the hunter, and somebody else had to look after the children. So we are descended from primates who are wired to look after each other. And I think that we've forgotten that. I didn't pull myself up by my own bootstraps, and I don't know anybody who did. So I think that my starting point is we're going back to who we really are. At a time when we're so conscious of the fact that resources are being cut and that everything seems to be about money, I found myself yesterday talking about something slightly different, because on the one hand, we want the people whom we work with, we want the people who are working and caring for people, and we want the people themselves who are being cared for to be happy. But I thought, no, it's not just about happiness. And I went back to my own tradition. Actually, one of the leading thinkers is a rabbi in London, and he wrote, happiness is largely a matter of satisfying needs and wants. Meaning, by contrast, is about a sense of purpose in life, especially by making contributions to the lives of others. Happiness is largely about how you feel in the present. Meaning is how you judge your life as a whole, past, present, and future. And I think we're here as much because of meaning as because of happiness. And I want to acknowledge and pay tribute because you are at the cutting edge, way beyond almost any other place that I know of in the globe, thinking about co-production. Because it is a concept that will take you beyond where I was with time banking. As I looked at time banking, I thought it was a panacea, a silver bullet, and then I realized, no, what's at stake is much more fundamental than even time banking. Time banking is simply a tool. And I think that there I went back to my own background in literature, and to yours, and to T.S. Eliot's quote, "What is the meaning of this city? Do you huddle close together because you love each other? When the stranger asks, what is the meaning of this city, what will you answer? We all dwell together to make money from each other? Or this is a community? And the stranger will depart and return to the desert. O my soul, be prepared for the coming of the stranger. Be prepared for him who knows how to ask questions." I think that's where we all are. We're here because we have a whole new set of questions that we have to address, not just because aging is with us, but because baby boomers are aging in my country at the rate of about passing 65 at the rate of 10,000 a day for the next 16 to 17 years. So we will be dealing with aging for a while, and while I have yet to meet a baby boomer who acknowledged that he or she was aging, they do admit to having parents, and they do admit to having partners who just might need some help. And I think that as we look forward, we are really carving out a whole new domain. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about what I think is involved in co-production. Because co-production is just one word, but it stands for, to my mind, at least 5 different kinds of activity. The first you know about is supplying a critically missing element needed for any support system. It's supplying the informal support system for fragile families. It's generating a social group. It's creating a peer group. It's anticipating needs for aftercare after when a person comes home. And it involves enlisting the client to spread words and raise the awareness. But that's just one. The second thing is it's really transforming the relationship between the person who is cared for and the person who is the carer. It's translating and helping translate professional role and responsibility into something weird called friendships and peer groups and relationships of equality and relationships of reciprocity, so that the client, the person receiving the care, is not just a consumer, but is a co-producer of the relationship. I remember the last days of my late wife had dying of cancer. She was so happy counseling the nurses about how to deal with their teenage children. And that's what she talked about. She talked about the conversation she had in ways that she was able to give even in those last days. And I think the notion that when you're receiving care, that all you are is a recipient, a consumer, and not a co-producer, is a very limited vision. It's maybe about happiness, but it's not about meaning. And meaning is as important to a person who receives the care as it is to the person who's giving the care. And so ending a relationship of dependency and transforming that relationship is part of what co-production is about. The third thing it's about, and we all know this, is about dealing with financially strapped programs, because we'll never have enough money. But we are, in fact, able to begin to create and redefine the resources that are available. And one of the reasons, frankly, that I developed time banking was nothing seems to exist in this world anymore if it doesn't generate numbers. And so I wanted to generate numbers. Well, it turns out that the people earning the time credits, don't give a damn about numbers. They give a damn about the human relationship. So after they enter their first 2 or 3, we know of at least 4 million hours that are actually in the books that people have registered. But we're finding out from research that better than 50% of the people stop even recording the hours, and only 25% of them record them occasionally, and only 10% are really concerned about the accounts. So we know those figures are not useful, but we also know that generating numbers is helpful. And it's helpful in demonstrating things like return on investment and all that stuff that you have to do to get the funding that is critical. And so part of what co-production is about documenting what I'll call the in-kind contribution that really comes, and that in fact is going to have to be part of what we think about commissioning. The communities that can come up with the kind of in-kind support that's so critical are the communities that deserve the resources, and I think that as we look at priorities, we need to begin thinking of that. And that's the third thing. The fourth thing is that, particularly in my country, but perhaps in yours, we are advancing social justice, because the groups that do without are the groups that have been historically discriminated against. They are the minorities, they are the refugees, they are the asylum seekers, but they're particularly the African Americans and the Hispanics who are coming to the country. And we know that empowering people to define themselves not as just recipients and supplicants, but as co-producers, as workers, as part of a workforce who are enlarging the pie, gives the chance and gives them the status necessary to demand a larger share of the pie that they have made larger. And part of what we need to do is to document that contribution, because if we think of the pie only as about money, it's a zero-sum game. But if we think of it as a larger pie, then those who produce that larger pie are entitled to have a different kind of a status. The last thing that and that's number 4 in co-production. Number 5 is, in case you had sort of missed it, you're affecting system change. You are radically changing a system where we were trained as professionals. We were trained as human service professionals to ask, how can I help you? And we were not trained to say, I need your help too. We were not trained to say, I can't create the kind of world we both have to live in without your engagement, without the engagement of your kids and your family and your neighbors and community. And so affecting system change is what this is about. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means, because it would be nice and simple to think about this as simply adding one more program. But I want to say you're not just adding one more program. All of us have seen computers with the icons on the screen, with a program for Word or internet programs. We are talking about changing the operating system. We are talking about changing an operating system that fundamentally undergirds the whole economy. There's an economy that I talk about that gets referred to as the core economy, and I want to be explicit. Some of you have heard of things called families, neighborhoods, communities, peer groups, civil society. If you look at what that does, it's what produces kids who know that they're not supposed to lie, cheat, and steal. Kids who maybe have the work ethic. Citizens who know that there are responsibilities. And it, in fact, is what produces and what makes possible the whole market. But the market is only so big. When economists have finally recognized that there is something called a civil society, they estimate on a dollar value, if you gave it a monetary value, that the monetary value of that so-called core economy of family, neighborhood, and community is at least equivalent to 40% of the GDP. That's the size of it. There's another way of thinking about the core economy, and that is, we can do without it like we can do without the ozone layer. Forget about it, right? We just wouldn't have a sustainable planet. We wouldn't have a sustainable planet without the core economy that merely does a few things like raise children, take care of the elderly, make democracy work, and keep the planet sustainable, but nothing important, you understand, from the point of view of GDP. Where you are not just adding a program, you are rebuilding and renewing the core economy, its ability to perform its functions. And that's much more fundamental. And frankly, we have a monetary system that won't do it and isn't designed to do it. It will come as no news to you that money defines value by price. I think that's not too new a concept. But price is determined by supply and demand. So what we have done with price is to say, if it's scarce, price is high, it's valuable. If it's more abundant, we know it's cheaper. If it's really abundant, it's either dirt cheap or it's worthless, right? Now, I suddenly realized that meant being a human being was worthless because we're not scarce. And the universals that define us, the universals that enabled our species to survive and evolve, they are universals. So by definition, we have devalued every universal we need to survive and evolve. Not a really smart thing for a species to do. And what you are engaged in doing with co-production is to say, no, we have to enlist the universals. We have to tap people's capacity to care, to do something strange called listening, to be here for each other, just to be companions, but also to run errands, to have things like birthday parties, and just to be here for each other when we're needed. And if we don't rebuild that, we live next to each other, but we live as strangers. I don't know about you, but I've lived in the same neighborhood for over 50 years, and I don't even know until I decided to start a time bank there what my neighbors could do, what their hobbies were, what they liked to do, what pets they liked. even what kinds of things, what kinds of capacities they had to make things or to fix things, so that my guess is you don't know and don't feel free to ask somebody to fix a car, somebody to help you with drywalling, somebody to cut hair, somebody who can sew a button on a shirt, because that's not something you know about or ask about. So we don't even know our neighbors. And so the whole question of co-production, to my mind, is how we rebuild an organic system called neighborhood, community, civil society. What you're really asking caregivers to be, what you're asking yourselves to be, is a combination of, yes, a provider of service, but you're asking them to be almost a social secretary for the person, and you're asking them to be a community organizer. So those skills are going to be different, and that definition of role is going to be different. And they're going to feel better about themselves if you can begin to define those roles in ways that they can say, yeah, I can do that. I can phone some people up. I can ask, how many of you ask, or how many caregivers ask, who are the friends, who are the neighbors, who are the kids? What kind of a social network? Because people who are receiving care have survived by having social networks, and if we don't activate that and nurture that and support it and reinforce it, we leave people basically isolated. In the process of rethinking what it meant to rewrite the operating system, I thought, well, the way in which we talk about operating systems, if you're designing Windows or a program, is we ask, what are the algorithms we need to write? And I thought, let's look at the algorithms that we're building into co-production, the algorithms that we're building into, that I had to think about when I designed time banking. And I thought the first asset, the first principle, is that everybody, yes, everybody has something special to give. I remember when I was first starting thinking about it, I went to the home of an elder person who had just been visited by her adult children and grandchildren. And they walked out of there feeling really happy. They were smiling. One could boast about a job promotion they got. The kids were doing well at school. And they walked out of there smiling, and I said, you're not looking happy, you're looking sad. What's the matter? She said, well, I have nothing left to give them but love. And I thought, what kind of a world is this where a person views that as a nothing? The second algorithm, so we have to begin thinking about assets, and we have to begin rethinking how we view people. The second algorithm I had to rewrite was we've got to start valuing work that we have taken for granted. Because the old operating system, if we're going to be candid, was subsidized invisibly or visibly by labor exacted from subordinating women, and in my country exploiting minorities, and maybe exploiting seniors, and in some countries exploiting children. That's not the way in which we have to redefine what we honor as work. We have to record it, and we have to begin to understand that if people do work, it ought to be linked to some enhancement in quality of life. I'm not saying money, I'm not saying minimum wage, I'm saying some enhancements. We need to reinforce the rewards that go with that work, and we need to do it in a way that enables people to feel, no, this isn't a charity, this isn't a handout, this is in fact something that you've earned. And we've got to begin thinking about what are the ways in which we reward whole caring networks and engagement in caring. The third algorithm we have to rewrite is what the rendition of service means. And that I call the principle of reciprocity. You know, if a person knows that the only way they can get attention is by having a problem, that's their asset. If it's your sole asset, you protect it, you nurture it, and you grow it. So we need to send a message that says, no, I need you to pay it forward. I need you to help me build the world we both live in together. I need you to do what you can do, and I'll do what I can do. But this is a reciprocal relationship, because we both have to live in a world that goes beyond when I provide services and when you receive services, because, and frankly, my wife and I have been working with a food bank that serves about 5,000 people, getting them to think of themselves in a way other than we're here to receive what we're here to receive, is very difficult. And so, and as long as they're standing in line, that's who they think they are. And the notion that they are something other than that, you have to get them in a different setting and have a very different conversation. It may be a club, it may be a group, it may be a party, it may be an event, but it's very hard when people are there to receive, and that's their sole role, and they've got to establish eligibility. It's very hard to get them to think outside of that box, and that's work. The fourth value is really community. And I remember coming years ago to Romney, and I was told, well, nothing's going on in that town. And I thought, when I got there were 20 different groups doing all kinds of things, but nobody thought anything was going on in that town. What's going on in your communities is vibrant activity, and Wales is an extraordinary place. I've got to admit, it may sound unpatriotic, but I feel that you've got I'm much more at home with your values than I am with some of the values that is putting Trump up as a national candidate. So it feels very good to be in a country that's retaining some sanity, at least. And I'm hoping that my country will live up to some expectations that we have. We're talking about not just a program, we're talking about system change, and we're talking about what amounts to a paradigm shift. And I thought that it might be useful to explain what I mean by a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift means that the map that you were driving on is not the right map. If you're following a route on a map that doesn't get you to where you want to go, no matter how fast you drive, you're not going to get there. And I thought to myself, what time banking is about and what co-production is about is really about changing the whole paradigm so that what we're doing, let me see, is in fact changing the whole map. And it means we need another map. It means seeing those whom we help. The old map was we saw those and helped only in terms of their problems, not in terms of their strength. We defined in the old map the economy only in terms of money and work only in terms of jobs. We treated clients as consumers and not as partners and co-producers. We built walls of privacy and confidentiality that left those very families isolated and vulnerable. And we defined value exclusively by market price so that despite abundance, we lived in scarcity. In a different setting now, a new paradigm shift involving co-production has meant literally that ethnic barriers have fallen when every group is regarded as bringing special cultural gifts that enrich all. Age barriers fall when seniors and teenagers discover they can do things for each other that the other can use and value. What, amongst other things, I tried to design was a way in which seniors with sweat equity could buy a kind of long-term care insurance that was not medical, but that was non-medical insurance. So that putting sweat in sweat equity means that you, for your parent, can get them some hours of respite, some hours of care, some rides, some help. Then in effect, you're creating a new kind of social insurance. I've seen it change whole schools, where instead of remediation teacher, so we have schools many in Washington, D.C., where only 18 to 20% of the third graders can read in third by the time they finish third grade. And they get from grades 1 to 3 to learn how to read, and then grades 4 they're supposed to be able to read in order to learn. Well, if only 18 to 20% can read at that level, guess what happens to them in fourth grade? So I recruited a new group of unemployed teachers called 5th and 6th graders who, believe it or not, knew the alphabet and could help with 1st and 2nd grade readings. And they were much better, and they literally eliminated the need for remediation for the third graders, because the third graders would work for them much harder than they'd work for a remediation teacher to learn how to read. And the best teachers were the special ed kids in 5th and 6th grade who had been on that journey and knew what the struggles were and could listen and could spot the problems and could explain how they got through the problems. I can tell you with co-production that juvenile arrests, rearrests, plummeted from 34% to 6%. This was after the first offense, when they came before a jury of teenagers and had to explain to the teenagers why they did something stupid. And the teenagers on the jury were former offenders who had done just what they had done and could tell them that's the wrong way to go and here's the right way to go. And they listened to other teenagers. So when we begin to think about co-production as engaging, so the teenage ex-offenders are doing more for the rule of law than my law students are, and even than my law school graduates are. And so I think that we need to begin rethinking. And then I'm dealing with people coming out of prison who have about a 70% recidivism rate in terms of rearrest within 3 years. So we sat down with them and I talked to some who really wanted to change, and I said, well, what do you want to be called? They said, we don't want to be called ex-cons. I said, okay, what do you want to be called? So after we talked for a while, they said, well, we'd like to be called homecomers because we're coming home. I said, okay, but people are still going to ask why are you here and what. And they said, well, if we could become called students, if we could call ourselves students, people wouldn't be afraid of us anymore. I said, well, my university won't accept you, my community college won't accept you. They said, well, can't we create our own academy and enroll in it? I said, yeah, but that means you got to create a curriculum. So they came back to me and said, well, we think we need a mind and body and spirit curriculum. The mind deals with the stuff we didn't learn in elementary school and in high school. The body deals with substance abuse and obesity. And the spirit, they said, we need to help rebuild and make the community safe that we made dangerous. So they get up every morning at 6:30 to provide safe passage for kids going to school across gang territory and for kids when they come back at 2:30 or 3:30 from school. And they have made their neighborhoods safe. And they are respected and greeted with affection in some of the housing developments that before were too dangerous. So I'm saying you get a paradigm shift when you begin rethinking in terms of co-production. That's not just adding a program, that's really dealing with basic respect and basic trust and making it possible to trust people who you don't know. But one of the reasons I invented time banking was I wanted every action to leave a footprint. If I'm only going to see a person once, they may as well hit me over the head and take my money. But if that's going to leave a footprint and other people are going to know about it and their peer groups are going to know about it, they don't. So in 30 years, I know of only one theft in millions of transactions of one cell phone by one teenager, and within an hour, everybody knew who had done it, and that kid had a lot of hours to earn to get back into that community. So we need to enable people who do good deeds, I think, to leave footprints, and that's important that be acknowledged and recognized. I'm simply I made a note to end really with a poem that was sent to me because it captures, assuming I can find it, captures much of the spirit of why we're here. And I think we know that we're here not just to deal with needs and not just to deal with a financial shortcoming, but we're here because this is part of the meaning of our lives. And somebody sent me this, a friend sent me this poem after I had helped them, and this was their way of thanking me. They said, the poem reads, I asked for strength, and God gave me difficulties to make me strong. I asked for wisdom, and God gave me problems to learn to solve. I asked for courage, and God gave me dangers to overcome. I asked for love, and God gave me people to help. I received nothing I wanted. I received everything I needed. That's why we're here.